Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Chapter 7 of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan is titled Of the Ends or Resolutions of Discourse. And ends is actually being used in more than one way here. So although Hobbes is very much a critic of ambiguity, he may be falling into a little bit of his own in ways that we'll talk about. So this chapter is not only going to include what are we up to when we're engaged in discourse, what is our ultimate goal or the culmination. He's also going to bring in some important reflections about, we could call it faith, belief, or trust, credibility of our starting points for our engaging in mental or verbal discourse. So he's going to start out by saying, of all discourse governed by desire of knowledge. So that's not all discourse, right? That is when we are trying to get to some resolution. He's actually going to talk about, the parallel a little bit later between deliberation, which in the previous chapter he talked about as an alternation of different passions leading to some sort of resolution. There's a parallel between that and the process of doubt. And when we doubt, what are we doing? We're saying, well, it could be this way, it could be this way. We're trying to figure out what's actually true. Knowledge is supposed to be of what is actually the case. So when our discourse is regulated or governed by this desire for knowledge, then there's going to be, as he's going to say, an end to it. Now, it could be an end as in this is how the process terminates. He gives you the example of our train of thought being interrupted. We could imagine somebody comes in the room while we're trying to think our way through something and they're like, hey, did you hear the latest news? And we're like, oh man, now I got to stop thinking about the thing I wanted to think about. We reached an end in that sense, but we could also attain end in a different sense when we actually get to where we want to be going, right? We figure things out, or maybe we have to put them on hold for a while. He says that, we could try to figure something out, and then we realize, I need more information. Let's just pause this. And then we remain in kind of a state of doubt. So he goes on and he says that all of this is opinion, or we could say plural opinions. And what we're doing when we're engaging in mental discourse or thinking to ourselves is ultimately making judgments about things, saying this is the case, making affirmations, making negations. Judgments could also be hypothetical. Well, if this is the case, then this will be the case. So he says that the last opinion in search of the truth of past and future is called the judgment, or resolute, resolved, right? And final sentence of the person who is discoursing. And then he says that no discourse whatsoever can end in absolute knowledge. Now, that's an interesting thing for him to say, given that he is essentially presenting the entirety of Leviathan as reliable knowledge about human nature, about how to organize society, about a number of other related topics. But Hobbes is saying we can't actually have absolute knowledge, only conditional knowledge. What does that mean? The ways things are connected together. So he gives you some examples. He says, the knowledge of consequence, which I've said before is called science, it's not absolute but conditional. No person can know by discourse that this or that is, has been, or will be, which is to know absolutely, but only that if this is the case, then this is also the case. If this has been, then this has been. If this shall be, then that shall be, which is, he says, to know conditionally, and that not the consequence of one thing to another, but one name of a thing to another name of the same thing. So, this is paring down our idea of what knowledge consists in, but hypothetical knowledge or conditional knowledge is still pretty good. We can know a lot about things. And then he's going to start talking about discourse in language. Now, remember that discourse in language and mental discourse are essentially parallels to each other for Hobbes, but there are certain advantages to externalizing our thoughts onto whatever medium it happens to be, discussion, paper, electronic devices now in our time. And Hobbes is going to lay out something that by now, perhaps to a reader is already rather familiar. There's good ways to conduct ourselves with language, and then there's less good or deficient ways. So we should begin with definitions of words, right? Definitions of what he calls names. And if we do that, then we connect them together into affirmations. And if we've got good definitions, the affirmations should, provided we're putting them together correctly, should also be good. That then leads to syllogisms, that is connected affirmations, which should lead us to some sort of conclusion. And we put enough of those together and we actually have science or knowledge of things. So, that can be quite good. But what happens if as he says, the first ground of such discourse be not definitions, or if the definitions be not rightly joined together in syllogisms, then the end or conclusion is again opinion, namely of the truth or somewhat said, though sometimes in absurd and senseless words without possibility of being understood. So if we begin in a precise way, we can reach knowledge, conditional knowledge. But if we've got, no definitions or bad ones, or we connect them together in syllogisms wrong, then all we have is opinion. We don't really have knowledge. And so, we can say opinion, knowledge are being contrasted here. Then he's going to have a little bit of a digression about conscience. And you might say, well, why is he talking about this? Well, a little bit of historical background. Hobbes is writing as a response to the English Civil War. There were religious people, and that was still going on in Hobbes' own time, who were claiming that their conscience revealed things to them as individuals that other people might not have access to, or that they cannot, speak against their conscience or corrupt or force another to do so. And so he says, insomuch that the plea of conscience has always been hearkened unto very diligently in all times, but afterward men made use of the same word metaphorically for the knowledge of their own secret facts and secret thoughts. And therefore it's rhetorically said, that means metaphorically, that conscience is 1,000 witnesses, right? And last of all, men vehemently in love with their own new opinions, obstinately bent to obtain them, gave those, their opinions, that reverence name of conscience, as if they would have it seem unlawful to change or speak against them. So, conscience becomes something that people appeal to when they don't actually have any knowledge or science, and they're trying to pull one over on you, or indeed on themselves. So Hobbes is not a big fan of that. He also talks about the problem of beginning with, as he calls it, another's saying. So when we, again, don't use definitions and sort of, work all this stuff out on our own or follow out somebody else's line of reasoning very closely. When we begin with another saying and not definitions, then once again, we're going to wind up in mere opinion and not knowledge, although people are going to claim it as being knowledge. Now, this leads us to some really interesting reflections on what we might call testimony on the side of the person who's saying something to be the case. And then he uses a couple terms: faith, belief, trust. All of these, are having confidence in that a person is not only telling us things that are true, accurate, but that person is reliable. So he is going to say that, here we go, the resolution is called belief and faith. Faith in the man, belief both of the man and of the truth of what he says, so that in belief there are two opinions, one of the saying of the man, the other of his virtue, right? So we can make a distinction between, as he's going to say, believing or trusting in or having faith in a man, signifying that we think they have a veracity, a truthfulness to them. We can trust them. But then there's also what it is that they're telling us. To believe what is said signifies only an opinion of the truth of the saying. So, we could have either of these separate from each other. Typically, we do connect them together. So, we could not trust somebody who tells us something that we independently know is true, and we believe that thing to be true, even though we don't trust them. We're like, even a stopped, watch or clock is right twice a day, right? That could be the case. On the other hand, we could also trust somebody, but think, they're out of their depth. They don't know what they're talking about. So, he talks about religious leaders. Religious leaders aren't necessarily dietitians. So if some religious leader is like, you should trust me, I am advising you to take these supplements, we could be like, I don't know about that. That might not be a true statement. I think you're a good person overall and generally truthful, but you're out of your league here. But we could also have cases where we think that somebody is indeed telling us the truth because we trust them to be the kind of person who would tell us the truth. Hobbes thinks that's how we often get ourselves into trouble. And so he's going to talk quite a bit about religious beliefs here and believing, for example, in the creed, not trust in the person, but confession and acknowledgement of the doctrine, right? So, and then he goes on to talk about when we're relying on something that is not taken from the principles of natural reason or from the thing itself, but the authority and good opinion that we have of the person who said it, it's the speaker or person we believe in or trust in and whose word we take as the object of faith, and honor done in believing is done to him only. So if we believe that the scriptures are the word of God, having no immediate revelation from God himself, our belief, faith, and trust is it in God? It's in the church, because the church is saying that this is coming from God. And he says, people who believe a prophet, they're doing the same thing. They take the word of the prophet. And we should also look at historians as being like that. He says, I should not believe all that is written by historians of the glorious acts of Alexander Caesar. If I think that I don't think that the ghost of Alexander Caesar would have any just cause to be offended. The historian might be offended if I don't believe him, right? So believing something to be true by authority, not a great use of our discourse, probably just going to lead us to opinion rather than to science, because we're placing faith in somebody who might be less reliable. He says, it's evident whatsoever we believe upon no other reason than what is drawn from authority of men only and in their writings, whether they're sent from God or not, is faith in men only. Faith, belief, trust that they actually have it right and that they are reliable or truthful. So, the genuine ends of discourse for Hobbes, end in the sense of the goal, should be figuring out what's actually true, and there's some pitfalls along the way that he wishes to point out to us.